Hello everybody, welcome back to American Textbook Reading. I'm Brian Stuart. Well, in this lesson we're going to talk about the seasons. So in lesson 8 we're talking about seasons. And do you remember how many seasons there are? How many seasons are in Korea? That's right, there are 4 seasons. So in this lesson you will discover 4 seasons. Of course, let's begin with talking about what is a season. A season is any of the 4 main periods of the year. Periods. So when we talk about periods, right, we can talk about the year. Let me ask you this. How many months are in a year? That's right. There are 12 months, right? So if we break up those 12 months, we can break up those 12 months into 4 different periods. And if we do that, we have 3 months for each period. 3 months. 3 months for spring, 3 months for summer, 3 months for fall, and 3 months for winter. That adds up to 12 months. So we have 4 main periods of the year. How do these periods change? If you look at it, you can see there are different weather conditions in each of these 4 main periods. So we're breaking up the year, 12 months, into 3 months each that have different weather patterns. What are they? Well, let's talk about those different periods. The first period we can talk about is spring. Spring is the season between winter and summer. Sure, okay, so that's one way to define spring, but we're talking also about how is spring different? What is the weather like in spring? What happens during spring? Well, if you think about it, many flowers, many plants start to grow again, right? We can say that flowers bloom. Flowers start to grow again. Bloom means that the flowers start to grow out. They start to grow out and they have new life. It's interesting to think about spring because another word for spring also means to jump, right? So if you spring, you have a jump, right? So it's like thinking about life. Life jumps out in the spring. Especially after winter, well, we'll talk about in a second, everything is dead. But then in the spring, life springs out. Life jumps out. So that's a good way to remember spring. Let's move on to summer. Summer may be your favorite season because what do you do in the summertime? You can go to the beach, swim in the water. It's very warm. It's very hot outside, actually. Summer is the warmest. We can also say the hottest season of the year. It comes after spring. So first we have spring, then we have summer. Summer, it becomes hotter, right? The weather's very hot. The day is longer. And that's an important point. I mean, why do the seasons change? I mean, we can talk about that a little bit, but if you look at the earth, this would be the earth here. Maybe the sun's way far away, right? It's shining out like this. Well, the earth turns, right? Sometimes the earth is like this, so that the North Pole, this is the equator, I'm sorry, not very good artist, but the north part of the earth is closer to the sun in the summertime, so it's hotter. In the winter, it changes. It goes back, and now the northern part of the earth is far away from the sun, and so it's cold. So in summertime, that's what's going on. The earth is actually a little closer to the sun in terms of tilting. So summer is the warmest season of the year. It comes after spring. Another 3 months, that earth starts to tilt back and it gets cooler. And then we have fall. Fall is the season between summer and winter. What happens in fall? We can see this picture here. You can see many apples on the tree. So in fall is when many plants bear fruit. And many other plants wheat will grow, rice will be ready. Farmers go out into their fields and they get the food from the plants because that is the time for the harvest season. Fall is really the harvest season. It's when farmers will go out and get the food from their fields, and we call that the harvest. Okay? And that, of course, occurs in the fall. And you can see that many trees will grow apples, pears, oranges, rice, wheat. All those things are ready to be harvested in the fall. And it's between summer and winter. So summer's over, winter is coming, and winter is here, right? Winter is here. Winter is the coldest season of the year. Very cold. Remember that diagram I showed you, right? Here's the earth. Now the top part of the earth is pointing away from the sun, which is way over here. Okay? So the sun is shining on the earth, but the earth is tilted, right? So, I'm sorry, it should be more like this, right? Okay? But the earth is tilted away, so now it's cold. We're not getting as much sunlight as we did in the summertime. So it's a very cold season of the year. It comes after fall. Very cold, and all the life dies, right? Most of the plant lives, it dies or it just goes to sleep, really. Because, don't worry, after winter, what happens? Spring will come back, right? So it makes a cycle. Okay. Let's talk about daylight. Daylight is very important when we talk about the seasons, as I told you a little bit before. In the summertime, we have the most daylight. In the wintertime, we have the least daylight. Again, that's because of the earth, the way that it moves as it spins. Daylight. Daylight is the light that comes from the sun during the day, of course, because it's daylight. We don't call it night light, right? We call it daylight. So daylight is the light that comes from the sun during the day. And like I said before, in the summertime, we have more daylight. In the wintertime, we have less daylight. That's important to remember. Similar. We have this word here, similar. Similar means almost alike. Not exactly alike, right? If you want to say something is 진짜 똑같아요, right? That's exactly alike. Exactly alike. But in this case, similar is not exactly alike. No. Similar is almost alike. So, almost alike. Not 진짜 똑같아요, not exactly alike, right? But almost alike. It looks similar. So if you have these two twins here, looks like they had maybe a little argument and he's making up with his brother. They're not exactly alike. There's a little difference between them. So they are similar, but not exactly alike. They're almost alike. They're almost the same. Okay. The next we have is a pattern. A pattern is something that happens in a cycle. Remember, we just talked about the seasons: spring, summer, fall, winter. What happens? It goes back to spring, and then it happens again. In every year, it happens the same way, and that follows a pattern. A pattern is something that happens in a cycle. So in other words, it repeats again and again. Also, we can take a look at shapes like these leaves here, and we can see that there's a pattern. Because this leaf is similar to this leaf, they have the same pattern. And we could say that these leaves grow in a very similar pattern, so that it's like a cycle. They will grow every year in the same pattern, in the same shape. And also, they keep doing it in a cycle. Okay, so that is a pattern. Okay. We also see this word ripe. What season, remember what I told you about the seasons, spring, summer, fall, and winter. What season is ripe associated with? Remember, ripe, if something is ripe, it's ready to eat. Before I told you about harvest, right? Harvest. This is the time when the farmers go out and they get the fruit from the trees. They get the rice or the wheat from the fields, because those foods, those plants are ripe. They are ready to eat. And when does that happen? Do you remember? Of course, the harvest happens in the fall. So when food is ripe, usually in the fall, it's ready to eat. And farmers will go out and get the food and that is the harvest. Okay? So if something is ripe, especially plant food, that means it's ready to eat. It's good for you too. Kiwi is very good. You don't want to eat a kiwi fruit when it's not ripe. Ugh, it's sour, right? When it's ripe, it's delicious, sweet and delicious. Okay. Let's take a look at our chart here. Our chart will show us the 4 seasons. So we have the name of the season here. We have the first 2 here. On the next slide, we'll see the other 2. But we have the name here. We have a picture associated with each season. And we have a little bit of a description about talking about what these seasons are like. Let's go over this chart. So first of all, we have spring, and we can see this girl here. She's got the flowers. The flowers are blooming, right? The life is springing forth. In the spring, the weather gets warm. Remember, spring is after the winter, so it's getting warmer. Whew. Okay? People go outside. In the winter, they're all cold. They stay inside. But in the spring, you can start to go outside. Plants begin to grow. Plants begin to grow. That's what I was talking about before. Life springs out, right? Life springs out. Plants begin to grow again. That's in the spring. How about in the summer? This boy looks like he was just swimming, right? He can't swim when it's cold out. He wants to go swimming when it's hot out, right? So in the summer, the weather gets hot. People wear light clothes, like this boy, right? He's wearing a bathing suit. But people will also wear t-shirts and shorts, right? They don't have to wear a lot of clothes like they do in the winter. So people will wear light clothes, like t-shirt, shorts, sandals, things that are light clothes that are for warm or hot weather. They don't make you warm. Plants grow fruits. So plants are beginning to grow fruits, okay? We can see that they're growing, but they're not ripe yet, right? We have to wait until they're ripe. Let's move on. In the fall, that's our next season after summer. We see the picture of the girl, right? She's playing with the dead leaves. Actually, in the fall, it's kind of opposite to the spring, right? As I told you before, in the spring, life springs out. It starts to grow again. In the fall, life starts to die. Leaves start to die. So you see many beautiful colors. Sure, it's beautiful, but they're dead leaves. Let's take a look at fall. The weather gets cool, right? After the hot summer, the weather begins to get cool again. People wear heavier clothes. Remember, we talked about light clothes before. Now people are wearing heavier clothes. And we can see this girl, she's wearing a sweater, jackets, boots, long pants like jeans. These are heavier clothes. They keep you warmer. So heavier clothes. Leaves change color and drop from the trees because they're dying, right? They're very beautiful, yes, but they are dying leaves. Okay, then that's in the fall. Also, farmers will go out and get that fruit that is now ripe. In the winter, what happens? Look at these kids. They're having fun. They're on their sleds. They're in the snow. They're going to go play in the snow. So winter, even though it's cold, it can still be fun. What about winter? The weather gets cold, right? People wear very heavy clothes, okay? So people are wearing heavier clothes in the fall, but in the winter, they wear very heavy clothes. Look at these boys here, right? They are really bundled up. We talked about that in a previous lesson. They are bundled up. This is a good example of being bundled up because they're wearing very heavy clothes. They're covering almost all of their body. They're bundled up. They are protected from the cold. They're wearing coats with hoods. They're wearing knit hats on their heads. They have heavy boots on. In fact, I think this boy here, he's wearing a complete ski suit, right? He's wearing a ski suit. So he is very bundled up, right? He's very warm. He's wearing very heavy clothes. Some plants have no leaves. That's interesting. If you look outside, the trees, some trees will lose their leaves, but other trees will keep their leaves or their greenness. Okay, there's different types of trees. Some trees will lose all their leaves. Some trees will keep the leaves, depending on what kind of tree it is. Okay, let's take a look at a video of the winter. Okay, you ready? What we're going to see here is we're going to see winter, and it's going to change seasons. And this is talking about a cycle. We can see this cycle as it repeats. Let's take a look here. Obviously, it's winter. The seasons are going by very fast, of course, in this video. It comes back to winter. It's cycling around. So winter, this is winter, heavy winter, spring. Then we have summer. It's very hot. And then it comes back to fall, and now it's winter again. So, it might start even snowing in the fall, but the winter, it's a lot of snow on the ground. Everything looks dead. Trees lose their leaves. Okay, so it's very fast. We saw how it cycles through the seasons. Okay, let's talk about our words. Let's review and see how well you remember the words that we just studied in the vocabulary section, right? Let's test our memory. In this exercise, we have the words here, and we need to match them to their definitions. So how well do you remember these words? Our words are spring, summer, fall, winter, daylight, and season. Okay, so let's take a look at these. First of all, we have number one, the season, right? We're looking for a season between summer and winter. If we look at our group of words, right, we can see right away what are the seasons. First of all, spring is a season, right? Winter is a season, true. Is summer a season? You bet. Summer is a season. Is daylight a season? No, daylight is not a season. What about fall? Fall is a season. That's true. So we have 4 seasons. What about season, though? Season is a season? That's kind of strange to say. Season is a different type of word. Season, of course, is your large word. It's your big word that includes all of the types of the seasons. So if we would say season, underneath season, we put fall, we put winter, we put summer, and we put spring. Okay? So these words fall under the big word of season, right? Season is like the umbrella word. It incorporates, or it includes in the group all these smaller words that talk about a type of season. These words are a type of season. So season isn't really the season we're looking for. We're only looking for these 4 words here. And of course we know there are 4 seasons. So we're looking for the season between summer and winter. So that means after summer and before winter. What is that season? Well, of course, if you chose fall, that would be correct. Okay? So out of these 4 words that we're looking at fall. Number 2, the season. So again, we're looking for one of these 4 words. We're looking for a season. In this case, the season between winter and summer. Okay, so after the cold winter and before the hot summer, we have a period in between those two. This is when life springs forward, right? So spring is our word that we need. Spring. Life springs out. Number 3, the light. So we're not talking about a season, we're talking about light. The light that comes from the sun during the day. Actually, that's very easy, right? Because we're looking for light that occurs during the day. That, of course, is daylight, right? So that's an easy one. We're looking for the light that comes from the sun during the day. Of course, we call that daylight. We put these 2 words together. Day and light, put them together, we have daylight. Okay, let's move on. Number 4, any of the 4 main periods of the year. Any of the 4 main periods of the year. Now we need a large word, right? We need a big word that includes all of the seasons, because the seasons are the 4 main periods of the year, but we're looking for a large word that incorporates or includes all of those. And of course, like I told you before on the previous slide, that word is season. So any of the 4 main periods of the year would be a season, right? We're not saying specifically which one it is. We're going one step higher, or we're talking about the large group, and of course that is season. Okay, number 5, the coldest season. So here we're looking for a season of the 4 words. Remember, we underlined the seasons before. Okay, so now we're looking for the coldest season of the year and coming after fall. So after fall, it becomes very cold. Kids are bundled up. They go out and they play in the snow. What season is that? Of course, that is winter. Okay, so that would be the season of winter. Finally, number 6, the warmest season. So again, we're looking for season and we're looking for warmest, the hottest season of the year, and it comes after spring. So spring, summer, fall, winter. So we're looking for summer here, right? And that is the warmest season of the year. It comes after spring. Okay, so that's our words. Let's move on to this nice chart here. And this chart gets to what we were talking about a little bit before. Remember, I mentioned about the summertime, the days are very long. In the winter, the days are very short. This chart shows us that idea. The seasons and the sun. Remember that chart that I showed you before of the earth, or that diagram? The earth moves like this. If the sun is out here, right, sending its sunlight or daylight, right, to the earth, sometimes the earth is tilted away from the sun, right? It's away. Sometimes the earth is tilted the other way. When it's tilted away, that's winter. When it's tilted towards the sun, that's summertime. So the daylight, the amount of daylight hitting the earth varies. We can see that in this chart. In March 25th, March is a month, right? We talked about 12 months, and we divide those 12 months into 3-month periods. March is a month. What season is March in? March, of course, is in the spring. So if it is March, it's spring. Sunrise. This means, when does the sun rise? When does the sun seem to come up over the horizon? 6 o'clock in the morning. Wow, that's very early, isn't it? Whew. Are you awake at 6 o'clock? Okay, 6 o'clock in the morning. 6:07 in the morning is when the sun comes up. When does the sun go down? When is it sunset? Right? Sun comes up, sun goes down. Sunrise, sunset. The sunset is 6:15 p.m. Wow. If you look at it, 6:07 a.m., 6:15 p.m., that's almost exactly, not exactly, but almost exactly 12 hours, right? 12 hours and 8 minutes. Okay, so we have 12 hours of daylight. That's how much daylight we have during the spring, a typical month in the spring. Let's move on to the next one, July. July is another month. What season is July in, right? The months of spring are March, April, and May. Those are the 3 months for spring. What are the months for summer, right? Then we have, so after March, April, May, we have June, July, August. So July is the middle month of summer. So July belongs in summer. In July 25th, the sun rises at 5:35 a.m. That's really early. Wow, I don't know if I'm awake. I'm still sleeping at that time, right? How about you? Are you sleeping at 5:30 in the morning? It's very, very early. The sun comes up at that time. And it goes down at 8:19 p.m. That's late, right? That's very late in the evening, right? Most people have already eaten their dinner, right, at 8 p.m. They're already getting ready for bed sometimes at 8:19. So look at this. Wow, that's a lot of hours of daylight. 14 hours. You see, in the spring, we only had 12 hours. But in the summer, we have 14 hours and 44 minutes. That's really long. There's a lot of daylight in the summertime. We have a lot of daylight. And that's why it's so hot. One of the reasons why it's so hot, we have more daylight. And of course, the sun is closer to the earth is closer to the sun on the northern hemisphere. Okay. Now, down here we have September. What month is that? So, if June, July, August, those are the summer months. What are the fall months? September, October, November. September, October, November. Those are the fall months, right? That's fall. Okay? So fall is September. In the fall, the sun rises. Now look at this. The sun is rising later, right? The sun was coming up at 5 o'clock, 5:30 in the morning in the summer, but now it's taking longer and longer to rise, right? And it goes down at 7, so that gives us 12 hours and 9 minutes. So you see, spring and fall are very similar. In the spring, we have 12 hours and 8 minutes. In the fall, we have 12 hours and 9 minutes. It's almost the same, right? So that's because of this cycle, right? Because the earth is spinning back and forth, so it's coming back around, right? And the fall is very similar to the spring in terms of weather and in terms of daylight. Now, finally, on our bottom chart here, we have December. December, what month or what season is December in? If fall is September, October, November, what are the 3 months after the fall? December, January, and February. Those are the 3 months for winter. Once more, December, January, February. Those 3 months are in the winter. So December is in the winter. And the sun rises at 7:15 a.m. That's later. Now, usually we're waking up at 7:15, right? Not 5:30. That's too early. But 7:15, that's a little bit more of a decent hour. That's a more friendly hour of the morning, right? And the sun is coming up at that time. Look at this. It goes down so early, 5:56. Look at the difference there. In the summer, right, the sun went down at 8:19. That's late at night. In the wintertime, 5:56, that's like 6 o'clock, right? Some people are still eating dinner and the sun's going down. That's early. I remember when I was living in America, of course, these times are different depending on how far north you go. If you're further north, the sun goes down earlier. I remember when I was living in America, I was living in a northern state. The sun would go down at 4:30 in the afternoon. Wow, that's really early. Okay, so 6 o'clock at sunset, you only have 10 hours and 41 minutes of daylight. So basically, this chart is very interesting, isn't it? It shows us that we have a lot of daylight in the summer, and a little bit of daylight in the winter. And of course, in the spring and the fall, they're about the same. They're in between the summer and the winter. So we can see that depending on the season, we have different lengths or different amounts of time for daylight. In the summer, we have a lot of daylight. In the winter, we have less daylight. That's very important to remember. Okay, let's move on. Here we have some pictures, and we need to choose the season with longer hours of daylight. So we just looked at that chart, and we looked at it in a lot of detail, right? But we want to know what season has longer hours of daylight. So for number 1, we have 2 choices. A is spring, B is summer. So which season, according to the chart we just saw, which season has longer hours of daylight, more daylight? Do you remember? In the summer, we saw that we had more than 14 hours of daylight, but in the spring it was only 12. So obviously, the summer we have more hours of daylight. In the summer, it said 14 and some minutes. Here we only had 12 hours. So we have longer hours of daylight in the summer. Okay. How about this one? Choose a season with, again, longer hours of daylight. We have the fall and we have the winter. In the fall, remember, it's similar to spring, so we had about 12 hours and a few minutes of daylight. But in the winter, do you remember that? We only had about 10 hours of daylight. So which season has longer hours? That, of course, would be the fall. They have about 12 hours of daylight. Okay. Finally, we come to our true-false questions. Circle T for true, F for false. So let's take a look at number 1. Winter is a warm and colorful season, right? Winter is very warm and colorful. Does that sound right to you? In the wintertime, there's a lot of snow. Snow is white. The trees have lost their leaves. They usually look black. So winter really is black and white, not a lot of colors. So that doesn't seem right. Also, snow is not warm. So this is not correct, right? It's false. To make this sentence correct, we would have to cross out winter and put spring or fall. either one, spring or fall. Because in the spring, starts to get warm. Flowers are blooming. We can see many colors. Also in the fall, it's warm. It's a little cooler though, so maybe that fall's not a great answer for this one. But it's still colorful because the leaves are changing color on the leaves. But I would have a little bit of problem with fall because fall is getting cooler. It's not so warm. Spring, of course, would be your best choice to change the sentence to make it true. But we have to change it, so it's false. Okay, number 2. In summer, there is little daylight. Little means not a lot. Just a little bit of daylight. Is that true? On the chart that we studied a couple slides ago, we saw that summer had a lot of daylight. It was the longest time for daylight. They're the very long days for daylight. So that's not true, right? In the summer, there is a lot of daylight. Not little, but a lot of daylight. Okay, so in the summertime, there's a lot of daylight. Summer is a season with the most daylight. Number 3, the pattern of the seasons is always the same. The pattern, remember we talked about pattern, and remember pattern is similar to a cycle. And a cycle is something that repeats itself again and again and again. So the pattern of the seasons is always the same. Sure, because that cycle continues the same way every year. Every 3 months is spring. Every 3 months is summer. The same 3 months is fall, and the same 3 months are winter. Every year it's the same. So the pattern of the seasons is always the same. Yeah, you bet. That's absolutely true. Okay, well that wraps up our vocabulary and learning about the words associated with the seasons. Okay, we're going to take a short break here and get into the reading section next. Okay, welcome back. Let's go over the reading passage. Now, as you know, the subject of this lesson is seasons. So in this reading passage, first of all, we have to define. We have to say, what is a season? And that's what the first sentence does. A season is a time of year. So we define what does season mean, right? That's our first sentence. A season is a time of year. And as we saw before, the time of the year, 3 months, 3 months, 3 months, 3 months. A year is 12 months. So a season is a time of a year or a period of the year. There are 4 different seasons, right? We talked about that, 4 different seasons. So this passage is going to talk about those 4 different seasons, what they're named, and what are the characteristics of each season. Most importantly, though, every season has different weather. We talked about that. Different weather, right? We saw, obviously, in the summer it's very hot, winter's very cold. This is all different weather. That's how we know that the seasons are changing. The seasons are changing because the weather is changing. So, with every season has different weather. Now we can talk about also the pattern. The pattern of the seasons is always the same. It's always spring, summer, fall, winter. Always in that order. That order doesn't mix up, right? We don't have spring, winter, fall, summer. No, that's crazy, right? It's always the same. The pattern is always the same every year. So no matter what year it is, we know that spring will come first, then summer, then fall, and then winter into the next year. That is the pattern. It's always the same every year. So it's always the same every year. Okay, of course we have spring, summer, fall, winter. That always happens. That's always the same. Doesn't change. Let's talk about the different seasons then. What are the characteristics? The characteristics or features of each season. I just said a couple of words there. One is a little bit of a long word, characteristics. What are the characteristics? Characteristics is the same as features. Features of each season. In other words, what can we say about each season? How can we describe each season? We're going to talk about the characteristics or the features of each season. Let's start with spring. Spring is warm. That's a characteristic or feature. Warm and colorful. Warm and colorful are characteristics or features. Those are things we can use, words we can use to describe something. Characteristics or features. Spring is a warm and colorful. Those are adjectives, right? We can use these adjectives, really are talking about characteristics or features of each season. In the spring, there are many hours of daylight in the spring, right? There are many hours of daylight. Not the most, but many hours of daylight. Remember from our chart, we saw that there were about 12 hours of daylight in the spring. Okay, we can play outside. Sure, we can play outside because it's warm, right? And we can enjoy the plant blossoms, right? We talked about plants blooming, right? Flowers bloom in the spring. Flowers bloom in the spring, and that's why it's very colorful, right? Coming back to colorful, we have reds, we have whites, some flowers are purple, some flowers are blue, the grass is growing, it's very green. We have a lot of different colors. So that's why spring is a very colorful season. Let's move on. What characteristics or features can we say or use to describe summer, right? What characteristics does summer have? Well, in the summer, the weather is similar to spring, not the same, because in the summer it's hotter. It's not the same as the spring. It's similar, right? It's still warm, but it's warmer than the spring, right? So it's similar, but not exactly the same. But it becomes much hotter, right? It becomes much hotter. That's one main feature or characteristic of the summer. Whew, it's very hot during the summer, right? You sweat a lot. Summer is a season for swimming at the beach. This boy has the right idea, right? He's at the beach. He's swimming in the water there. Looks like he's standing on the water, but he's swimming. He's having a good time in the beach, at the beach, at the beach. So what do you do? In the summertime, does your family go to the beach? Do you have fun at the beach? Or do you go to a swimming pool near your house? Of course, you want to go outside and play, but not too much. It's a little hot, right? But don't worry, you have a lot of hours during the summer. You can also go out in the early morning or the evening when it's cooler. In the middle of the day, it's very hot. Okay, let's talk about fall. What are the different features or characteristics about fall? Well, one is that the weather becomes colder. It becomes colder, right? Summer is over. Now it's very hot in summer, but now the weather is becoming colder. It's becoming colder. It becomes colder in fall. There are less hours of daylight. That's another feature of the fall, right? Less hours of daylight than in summer. So in summer we had a lot of daylight, but now we're getting less and less hours, fewer and fewer hours of daylight than in the summertime. Another feature of fall is that leaves change color. Leaves change colors. As we can see, this little girl is playing with the leaves. The leaves are many different colors, gold, brown, red, yellow. Very beautiful colors, especially if you go out in the mountains during the fall. You can see all the beautiful colors. We say that the leaves are changing. The leaves are changing. So, did you go out in the fall? Did you see the changing leaves? I'm going to go look at the leaves change color. That's very common in the fall. Many people go out and do that. So, leaves change colors and drop from the trees. Drop from trees. That's another feature or characteristic of fall. Another very important characteristic is many fruits and vegetables are ripe, ready to eat in the fall, right? That's when the farmers go out in the field and they get that food and they bring it back and then they sell it in the supermarket. So in the fall we can see many different types of fruit that is available. Of course, modern technology, farmers are very good at making sure fruit is ripe throughout the year. So thank goodness, because we want to eat apples all year round, right? We want to have oranges all year round. But usually, traditionally, in the fall was when food was ripe. fruits and vegetables. And that's when they went out in the fields and got them. So these are all characteristics about fall. We have one more season to go. Do you know what it is? That's right, it's winter. Winter is the coldest season, right? That's one very important feature or characteristic of winter. It's the coldest season of the year. In winter, snow falls. So snow falls from the sky, right? It's not rain anymore. It's too cold, right? That liquid turns to a solid. Now it's snow and it's falling from the sky. We have to wear our hats and gloves. Remember, hats and gloves, that's heavy what? Heavy clothes. Those are heavy clothes, right? Heavy clothes. We have to wear our heavy clothes in the winter. Hats, gloves, ski suits, boots. Those are all heavy clothes. We have to bundle up in the winter time. Every season is different. So now we're coming away from it. We're kind of concluding. Every season is different, as we have seen in this reading passage. So every season is different. Every season has different characteristics and features. There are special things to do in every season. True. In the springtime, you can go out and look at all the flowers. Wow, smell all the flower blossoms, right? Life is coming out again. Enjoy that. In the summertime, you can go to the beach. It's very hot weather, right? You can go swimming. In the fall, you can look at the leaves falling. You can gather fruits and vegetables that are ripe. And in the winter, you can play in the snow. Okay, so every season, there are special things to do in every season. These things, you have to do them in each season. Don't go swimming in the winter. That's too cold, right? You can't go out to your apple tree and pick apples in the spring. There are no apples. There's just flowers on that tree, right? The apples have to ripen and become ready in the fall. Okay, so special things to do in every season. Each season has different things to do. Okay, now we've come to our reading skill chart. In our reading skill, we can see we have the main idea and the details. So what is the main idea of this passage? The main idea is this sentence here. There are 4 different seasons. So there are 4 different seasons. That's our main idea, right? That's like our topic sentence. That's what we're going to talk about in this passage. 4 different seasons. Now, that's our main idea. We have details to support that main idea. If we say there are 4 different seasons, we expect 4 main details. And of course, different seasons, what are those 4 different details going to be about? Of course, we're talking about the 4 different seasons. We can see that. We have spring, summer, fall, and winter. Those are our 4 details that support the main idea, 4 different seasons. Okay, so that's a very good organization. Now, in each description, in each detail, we have blanks. We have to fill in with these words at the bottom. Our words are coldest, warm, hotter, daylight, and ripe. So, how do these words fit into these details? First of all, we have spring is a beep and colorful season. So what word fits in there? Spring is a coldest season? That doesn't fit. Grammatically, it doesn't fit either. Spring is a warm and colorful season? Well, yes, actually, that sounds right, and that's what we learned before. Spring is a warm and colorful season. It's becoming warm again after the cold winter. There are many hours of what? Many hours of coldest? No. Warm we already talked about, so we don't have to worry about that. Many hours of hotter? That doesn't sound right. Many hours of daylight? Ah, that's it. Remember, we talked about that before. Hours of daylight. And by the way, that's a good expression to remember, a good grouping. When we're talking about how much daylight is there in a day, we're talking about hours of daylight. Hours of daylight. It's an important thing. When you study new vocabulary, don't just study the single word, but study words that are associated, words that go with that word. And this is a good example, hours of daylight. That's a good way to express that idea. How many hours of daylight, excuse me, how many hours of daylight are there in a day? In the spring or in the winter? Hours of daylight. It's a good expression. Okay, let's move on. In the summer, the weather is much what than spring. Now look at this. Much than. We're looking for comparison, right? We're looking for comparison. In the spring, it's warm, but in the summer, the weather is much what? Cold-est, that's a comparison, but does it fit here? Much coldest than spring? That doesn't fit. That's not correct. Much hotter. We're looking for one of these words, right? Hotter. So that's right. It's much hotter, and that's true. In the spring, it's warm, but in the summer, it's much hotter, right? You sweat a lot, right? It's very hot. Okay, in the fall, let's move on. In the fall, many fruits and vegetables are what? Remember we talked about this before, right? Fruits and vegetables are ready to eat in the fall. They're ready to eat. They are ripe. So if they're ripe, they're ready to eat. Okay, let's move on to winter. Winter is the beep season. Now here, we're also looking for a comparison word, right? We talked about this. This was a comparison word, but that one up there. This one is also a comparison word. When we have EST, that means like the most, right? Of all the seasons, which season is the most cold? But do we say most cold? No, we say coldest. We don't say most cold. We say coldest. Winter is the coldest season, right? It is colder than fall, summer, and spring. It is the most cold. It is the coldest. Don't say most cold. Say coldest. Winter is the coldest season. Snow falls, and we wear hats and gloves. So again, we're wearing our heavy clothes. Heavy clothes. Okay, I have to go out of the box. Hats and gloves, very heavy clothes in the winter because it's very cold. Right? It's the coldest season. Out of all the seasons, it is the coldest season. So we can see our four main details that support our main idea. Main idea, there are four different seasons. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we can fill in the details, even more details, about each major group of the four. Okay, let's move on. Let's take a look at the comprehension questions, reading comprehension. So how well do you remember the passage? Number 1. Spring is the season that comes after what? Okay, so remember, we have a cycle. Sure, many times we think that spring is like the first. Most people start with spring. Spring, summer, fall, winter. But remember, the cycle starts again. So after winter, it goes back around to spring, and that comes after winter. So spring, summer, fall, winter, then back around to spring. So spring is the season, comes after winter, because winter is usually the last season in our cycle. Spring, summer, fall, winter, comes back around to spring. So after winter comes spring again. Spring is a season that comes after winter. Okay, so remember, it's a pattern. It repeats. It's a cycle. It keeps going around and around. Number 2, many fruits are ripe. When can we eat those fruits, right? Those fruits have been growing. They start growing in the spring. The flowers bloom. The flowers change into fruits during the summer. They're growing, but we can't eat them yet. We have to wait until which season? We have to wait until fall to eat those fruits. Many fruits are ripe, ready to eat in the fall. Not in the winter, not in the spring, but in the fall. Okay, let's move on to question number 3. We're talking about the hours of daylight in the spring. Remember the expression I taught you in the previous slide, right? The hours of daylight. Remember that phrase. We're talking about how much daylight, how many hours, how long, right, is the daylight? How many hours of daylight do we have in a day? In the spring, remember, it's different for each season. The spring has a certain number of hours a day. Summer's different. Fall's about the same. Spring and fall are about the same. Because remember, they're in the middle, right? Summer is on one end, winter's on the other end. Spring and fall are kind of in the middle. They're transition, they're changing. They're halfway between summer and winter. So they're about the same in terms of hours of daylight. Remember, from our chart, we had about 12 hours of daylight in the spring. For the spring, we had 12 hours, right? But are more than that in the winter. So we're kind of comparing. So in the winter, do you remember? We had about 10 hours and about 41 minutes, so almost 11 hours, but still that's fewer, right? So the hours of daylight in spring are more than, right, than that in winters. 12 is more than 10. So that's true. A is true. So it's probably our right answer. Is it? You bet it's our right answer. But let's look at B and C just for practice. B, the hours of daylight in spring make spring the best for swimming. Is spring the best season? The number one choil for swimming? No, because summer is the hottest. That's the best for swimming. So summer is the best for swimming, not spring, right? Okay. C, are less than that in winter. So the hours of daylight in spring are less than that in winter. Is 12 less than 10? No, that's not correct, right? So that's just our practice. We can see that A is correct because 12 is more than 10. Okay, let's move on to number 4. The pattern of the seasons is from. Now we're talking about the pattern. The pattern of the seasons. In other words, the cycle, right? What is the order of the seasons? And remember, that's a pattern. It repeats again and again. So, what we're looking at in a year, how do the seasons fall? What is the order of the seasons? What season comes first? What season comes second, third, and fourth, or last? Let's take a look. In A, summer to fall. That's true. Summer and then fall. That's okay so far. And then spring to winter. No. Okay. Summer, fall, that's true. But then spring? No. Then winter. And then spring. So A is not correct, right? That's not the right order. That's not the correct pattern of the seasons. Okay. B. Let's take a look at B. Spring to fall. So first we have spring, and after spring we have summer, not fall. That's incorrect. So obviously B is not right. It was just continue. And then summer to winter, again, that's not correct either, right? It's spring. After spring, of course, is summer. And then summer goes to fall, right? So this is obviously incorrect. C's got to be right. Let's take a look. Winter to spring. True, yeah. After winter, we have spring. The pattern repeats again. Winter to spring, and then summer to fall. And then, of course, means after spring. So spring to summer, then fall. So first, well, we have winter, then spring, then summer, then fall. And that's correct. So C, of course, is our correct answer. This is the pattern of the seasons. Winter, spring, summer, fall. Of course, it doesn't matter where you start in the pattern. Most people, we traditionally start with spring. Most people think of spring as the first season, but it's okay. We can also start at winter, just as long as we're talking about the pattern. Don't break the pattern. You can jump in at any time. Summer, fall, winter, spring, or fall, winter, spring, summer, right? It doesn't matter where you break in, where you start. It's the pattern continues. The correct pattern of the seasons is from first season, and then don't break the pattern. Just keep the pattern, but you can jump in at any time. Okay, let's take a look at our chart here. Again, we're talking about the 4 seasons. Here we need to fill in the proper word according to the pictures and the description. So this is a pretty easy chart by now. I'm sure you'll get this very easily. First of all, we have the weather gets warm. People go outside. Plants begin to grow, right? Life springs out of the ground. Life springs out of the ground. Of course, we're talking about spring, right? That's a good way to remember. Life springs out of the ground, right? So we have life. Plants are growing out of the ground. In the next one, we see the boy looks like he's been swimming, so it's got to be warm outside, right? The weather gets hot. It's not just warm, it's hot. People wear light clothes, t-shirts, shorts, sandals, right? They're wearing light clothes because it's so hot outside. Plants are growing fruits, right? So the plants bloom in the spring, but during the summer, the plants are growing and they're growing fruits. What happens? I just said it, during the summer. In the summertime, the weather gets hot, people wear light clothes, and plants are growing fruits. The next season, of course, you remember the order of the seasons. You can just fill it in very quickly, but let's go over the next one. The weather gets cool. So after the summer, the weather starts to get cool again. People wear heavier clothes. Start to put on that jacket. Start to put on those long pants, right? Don't wear shorts anymore. Start to wear jeans or something like that. Leaves change color and drop from trees. That's a very significant or very important feature of fall, right? That season is fall. And then the last season, the weather gets cold, very cold, right? Brr. Okay? People wear very heavy clothes, very heavy clothes. Heavy clothes, and you think about it, that is heavy, right? A big jacket, that's heavy, right? You're wearing heavy pants. Maybe some people wear 2 pairs of pants, right? All that clothing is heavy, right? So it's heavy clothes. Some plants have no leaves. Some plants lose all their leaves. Of course, we're talking about winter. Okay, this is our chart for the 4 seasons, and we can see each season and compare it or describe it. These are the features or characteristics of each season. Okay, so I hope you've learned a lot in this lesson, okay? And we'll see you guys next time. Take care.